This is Lyndon. I'm just here to introduce you to our latest connector, which is called the GraphQL connector. If you're familiar with V2's remote schemas, this is remote schemas for V3 in the form of a connector. So I'll run you through a little bit of information and background, then show it in action and dive into some of the specifics of how it's configured and how it works. So like I said, this is the remote schemas feature from V2 kind of ported over to V3 using a connector as a platform. Among other things, this allows the federation of V2 projects into V3 supergraphs, but it can also federate other GraphQL APIs into your supergraph. This is implemented via our commands specification rather than our collection specification, if you're interested, which allows us to almost seamlessly proxy a GraphQL API and expose it as root fields in your V3 supergraph. We introduced some new features into Hasura V3 in order to make this happen. So if you're interested, you can look up argument presets and field arguments. These will allow you to configure how authentication headers and things like that are passed through. And the field arguments allows it to mirror the upstream API via a top-level command. So if your upstream GraphQL API and your V3 project share the same auth provider, you should simply be able to pass through your auth in the authentication headers, and everything should work quite seamlessly. If you have kind of static authentication, like you want to just expose a pre-authed API, you can do that too. Also, obviously, public APIs are fine. The configuration is very intuitive and straightforward. So the bulk of the configuration is actually generated via introspecting the upstream API and saving the GraphQL SDL. This is the standard GraphQL schema format, and all of your tooling should continue to work with this. I'll give you a little demo of the supergraph in action with two different GraphQL APIs, a Hasura API and the public countries API running in parallel. And this is the set of commands that you would need to run to add a new connector proxying a GraphQL API into your federated supergraph. So obviously you need a supergraph, you need a subgraph. And once you've done that, you can add the GraphQL connector, introspect the API after you've configured the location, add the link, make sure every service is running with Docker Compose Watch in this case, then update the link, and finally do a supergraph build to expose it. So I won't do all of that now. So saving some time, I'll just show you. So this is the API in action here. So all of these customers and employees are from the Chinook dataset exposed via Hasura V2 API. And then down here, the countries API is exposed from this public Trevor Blades countries example API. So you should be able to, for example, query countries. And then also, why not tracks? Let's just remove countries so that we can see the tracks at the top. There you go. So, I mean, nothing mind-blowing going on there, except the fact that we're now kind of proxying two GraphQL APIs in parallel via Hasura V3 via the GraphQL connector. So now I'll show you a little bit of the configuration involved in this. I'll just show you the countries example in this case so that we keep things a bit simpler. So here's our subgraph, here's our connector. So you'll have configuration.json split into introspection and execution. This lets you introspect a local dev copy or something that provides different information if you want to. You can choose to hard code or forward headers on each of the requests. And in this case, since it's just a public API, we don't need to do anything, but you could set authentication here, for example. After you introspect, you get back a GraphQL schema that you can modify if you want to ahead of actually importing everything. And then finally, when you add and update the connector link, you get your connector link configuration and then your set of models here. So that's it, basically. So if you've got any questions, please obviously reach out on one of our channels, maybe Discord, email, or other. But I hope you've enjoyed the show. I'm Lyndon, and this is the Hasura GraphQL connector. And if you want more information, then please go check out the README and the repo up here at, I'll put it on the slides, this location.
Rahul, anything you want to say to cap that off?
Yes, I just want to kind of talk about one small setting which would help current V2 users. This was a NDC GraphQL repo, and it has a lot of information on how execution introspection is happening. The one thing which I wanted to point out is that there is a setting of naming convention. If you put that naming convention setting, you will not have, you can remove namespacing, which DDN adds on top of the V2 graph, and this way your GraphQL shape will remain the same in V2 as in V3. And this is the repo which Lyndon shared, and please try it out and let us know on Discord or GitHub issues if any problems. But thank you so much.
Yeah, I was writing some documentation for this yesterday, and when I imported a Hasura GraphQL schema, the visualization and the number of commands that just shot into my DDN supergraph was pretty impressive. So it's cool to see all that coming together.
Awesome.